Hi, and welcome to this Metaphorix NAV Know-how webinar. Today we're going to be looking at dimensions and analysis views. We will have a look at how we set dimensions up and how we attach these things called dimension values to those dimensions, and how we tell Navision through the general ledger setup that we have dimensions in use. We will then look at how we can set the control on our GL accounts to make sure that the dimensions are always posted through with the records that are posted. And we will also look at how, where we can, attach dimension values to our static records such as customers, vendors and items. We will then, from a chart of accounts point of view, look at something called balance by dimensions, and here we will be able to see from what is called our global dimensions a different view of our chart of accounts. For dimensions that are not these global dimensions, then we will then have a look at the analysis by dimensions, where we will create an analysis view and run that view, and then finally we will export it to Excel and automatically create our pivot table. So from our database we will go and set up a new dimension. So I'm going to use the search box and come to our dimensions, and you can see in this dimension list that our Cronus database, which we're working on, has already got several dimensions set up, but I'm going to create a new one and I'm going to call it simply product. And you'll notice that the name and caption fields are automatically populated. This is just for use throughout Navision, where you can specify a different label if you wish. I will keep mine as product throughout. Once we've generated the code itself, we then need to add what are called values, which is what we will actually be posting against. So clicking on the dimension values, as usual, our Cronus database is all about bicycles, so I'm just simply going to create a dimension called wheels and give it a title of wheels. And of course, you would just create multiple values that are required to be analysed against. I'm just simply going to create that one at the moment and say OK. So once we have created our dimensions, we need to tell Navision that we are using them, and we do that through the general ledger setup. We have on the general ledger setup our dimensions fast tab, and in our Cronus database we have our two global dimensions being department and project. To explain globals, global dimensions are two dimensions of your choice that Navision will automatically post throughout Navision on your postings without you having to tell it to, in essence. Whereas our shortcut dimensions, these are the codes that we can only access through this thing called analysis by dimensions. You'll notice that the first two shortcut dimensions are indeed the same as the global dimensions, and that is correct, but dimensions 3 to 8 we can choose which ones we want to use. So in our example, I'm just going to simply drill down in shortcut dimension 7 and add my product dimension. So I can now pick that up from our analysis view. But before we do that, we would want to make sure from a chart of accounts perspective that those dimension codes are being posted against the various GL codes. So we'll go to our chart of accounts, and I'm just going to go down to our sales accounts, because that is quite often the place where the main dimension control is carried out, but against balance sheet accounts and expense accounts are all totally valid as well. In order to attach the control, we can simply just click on the particular GL account, and then up right in the middle of our ribbon here we can see we have our dimension button, and we've got two options here. At the moment I'm just going to use the single, but I will be showing you the multiple option in a moment. So dimensions single, and so in here it's up to me now to determine which dimension codes I want to use. So I'm going to pick up my product code here, because we're retail sales and I need to know which product is being sold. I'm going to leave the dimension value code blank for a moment and just explain why. Because against the value posting column I have some options. Blank is just there's no control at all. I have code mandatory, same code, or no code. The two that are used the most are the code mandatory and same code. And just to explain, if I select the code mandatory here, the rules now that I will be applying to this GL account is that any transaction that is posted and hits this particular account, it must have a product dimension. The fact that it's blank says I don't mind what that dimension is, but the code mandatory is saying I must have that product dimension code on that posting. So if a user was to post without the product code, then they would receive an error dialog box telling them that the code mandatory is set against the product dimension, and therefore you must enter a product dimension code. Other options that you might need to employ are, for example, if this sales account was specifically against an area, for example on the EU one, you could say you need just the EU example, but I'm just going to pick here that perhaps it's only a certain business group. So perhaps if this was retail sales but for large customers, or customers deemed as large on the dimension code. So here I would pick up that in fact business group, is industrial, so perhaps this is the wrong one to use. So customer group is the one I wanted, and this time I'm going to say it large, and the value posting in this case I'm going to say same code. So what Navision will then check is that there is a product dimension. Doesn't matter what code, but there must be one. But there must also be a customer group code, and that code can only be large. So if a posting came in from a customer that didn't have this large option on the dimension code, then again the user would receive an error. Anyway, I will be coming through this onto the customer card in a moment to explain that a bit further. So I'm happy with those controls on that one account. However, if I have multiple accounts that dimension control applies to, and it is the same dimension control, I simply highlight all of those particular GL codes, back to my dimension button, and you'll notice this time that the dimension single isn't available, it's greyed out. So I can only go to the dimension multiple being multiple GL accounts. So in here I then have to click on new, and again I can say I want my product. Again I'm still going to leave that blank, and do code mandatory. But this time for my customer group, I'm not going to select a code, but because for these it isn't any one particular customer group, it is any customer group, and therefore I will just simply make that code mandatory too. So I can now say OK, and then when I come back to the various codes, I can see that for each of the codes that I highlighted, those same dimension controls have been applied. Now we talked about the customer groups in here, and those customer groups and any dimension value that is applicable can be attached, as I said earlier, to our static records, our customers, our vendors, our items. So if we now have a look from a customer perspective, how we can set those controls. So from my customer list, I'll just have a look at this particular one, the Canon group. And again, I don't have to open up the record. I can if I wish to, but I have access to the dimensions from my ribbon. Again, I'm just going to go to the single dimension, and this particular customer is set up with an area code of 30, 30 being Europe North. The customer group is medium as opposed to the other options, and the department code is sales. I can also, on the customer record, as I did with the GL account, specify whether I want to have the control when records are actually being posted to the customer. In other words, we want to make sure that nobody has changed the area code in this case, or the medium code. So additionally, in fact I will just open the card, because we do have an additional dimension code that we could use on our customer card, and that is of the salesperson code. So again, we could just go to the dimensions and add salesperson code, but if we do that on the customer record and the salesperson leaves and a new person joins, that would not be, the dimension code would not be updated. So what we can do instead is attach that dimension code to the salesperson code. So if it is changed on the customer card, then it is automatically, it will bring through the correct new salesperson dimension when we select the customer on our record. So from here, I'll just show you how that is set up. So from our salesperson code, I can go to advanced, and I have my list of salespeople and purchaser codes. I can go to my navigate button. I can again open the record if I wish, but I can from the navigate ribbon go to dimensions, and then you'll notice here that the salesperson has indeed got a dimension for the salesperson code of PS, which happens to tie up with the salesperson code itself. I'll show you how that works shortly, but before we do, I just want to now have a look at it from an items point of view, because indeed we can attach dimensions to our items, as I mentioned previously. So from our wheel, we have created now a new product dimension and attached a dimension value of wheel. So from my navigate ribbon, I can go to my dimension codes, and so here for my front wheel I will add my product code, and I will pick up wheels, and I can say again, if I wish to, same code, make sure that nobody changes the code on the product. Now the way this all hangs together is that, for example, from our sales order or sales invoice, purchase order, invoice, it all applies the same. From a sales order, so if I just create a new order, and I will bring through that customer, the Canon group, because we did look at the dimensions already attached. So just by selecting my customer, if I now go to my navigate ribbon and dimensions, we can see that we have the area code that is auto-populated, the customer and department, and indeed, even though the salesperson was not attached to the customer card dimensions, because this salesperson code is attached to that customer, it's again bringing through the dimension attached to that salesperson code. So of course that makes the coding up of documents a lot quicker, and doesn't mean that the user has to manually do those codes. So down to our line of our sales order, and we'll pick up our front wheel. Of course it's the front wheel, and populate that through, and then from our line we can now see again from our dimensions that it has now brought through the dimension code of wheels for our order line. And of course, if you've got multiple products and attached those dimensions to those products, each of the lines that you generate with an item code will bring through the relevant dimension codes. Okay, so now I'd like to show you, once we've having all these dimensions being posted through, how from a chart of accounts perspective we can look at our, and if you remember, it's the two global dimensions that get populated throughout Navision for us automatically. So from our chart of accounts we go to our balance section in our home ribbon, and we can go to the balance by dimension, and we get presented with some options as to how we want to view this particular balance by dimension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to view it from the point of view from our GL account. So I will be showing on our matrix the lines being GL accounts, and then the columns I'm going to display as my department dimension code. I have to specify which period I'm going to be looking at, or indeed I can look at it across all periods, but in this case I'm just going to look at 1 month. This is a Cronus database, so of course our dates are always a little bit strange. So I'm going to be looking at 2016 December. And I can choose to filter or not filter on our GL accounts. Well, I'm just going to be looking at our expense accounts. So in this database, they're from GL account 8100 onwards. I can choose to set filters in terms of department or project, but I don't want to do it on here. I can then show or determine how and what values I want to show, whether I want to show the amount field or whether I want to include the closing entries or not. I can also choose to round the numbers up if I wish to. In the matrix option, I can see that I can specify whether I want to view it from day, week, month, quarter or year. and which accounting, what calendar I'm using, either the system calendar or the accounting period, whether I want to see net change or balance at date, and the column set. Now the column set in this case is relevant to the department dimension code, and you'll notice that you have a show column name here. At the moment it's just showing us ADM and sales. If I click on the show column names, it's actually showing the value of the dimension code rather than just the code, so entirely up to you how you view that. We don't click OK, otherwise it will just close down our screen for us, which we don't want. So we just go to Show Matrix at the top on our home ribbon, and here we can now see from a GL perspective against our various departments where the expenses, or what the expenses are for the given period. We can drill down and go and look at the individual entries if we wish, and indeed we can send it out to Excel if we wish to. However, what I would like to show you now, because this is only looking at our two global dimensions, I'd like to show you how we can view those other shortcut dimensions. And we do that through the analysis by dimensions routine. So again, I'm just going to go into dimensions, but this time I'm going to go to the actual full navigation list, and we'll be starting off with something called analysis views. You can have any number of analysis views set up and run them as reports as and when you require. You can see that we have the analysis view themselves, and then we can determine which of the dimension codes that we want to use. So I'm just going to set up a new one based on that product dimension that we've just created. So I'm just going to call it prod area, and sales by, the description is of your choice, by area and product, for example. My account source is GL, the other option being cash flow, but we're not looking at that today. And then I can specify the GL accounts that I want to record the dimensions against. Now, the reason why we would enter an account filter is because if this particular analysis view and the postings, the dimensions themselves, are only relevant to a certain set of GL accounts, then really that's all we need to record. Otherwise, Navision will generate what in effect is a separate little subtable looking for the combinations of dimensions against all the GL accounts, and dependent on how large your database is, how many postings you make, that could end up quite a large little table. So our account filter, well, on my GL account range for my sales, or my income statement in effect, because I probably want my expenses coming in as well, is 6100, and those going forward. So I'll be looking at all the GL accounts from 6100 forward. I can choose to use date compression. Again, I would recommend either none or day if you, and it's all about the number of records that you're recording. If you think you need to compress your analysis view, please just contact support and we'll help you make that decision. Calendar source, again, am I system or accounting period? In this case, I'm accounting period. And then I have to specify which of the dimensions that I want to use for this particular analysis view. I can use up to 4. In this case, I'm making it reasonably simple. I just want my area and my product. Back up to our general fast tab, you have a box here that's called Update on Posting, and what this allows you to do is that when your users post your sales or purchase transactions, whichever it might be, or both, that this little analysis view table is updated each time it's posted. You may decide again, if you're quite heavy on the number of transactions that are being posted at any one time, that you will manually update the analysis view as and when you want to run it. I'm going to show you how you can get it to automatically update. As you'll notice, you can't tick the box because that's controlled by this function at the top, Enable Update on Posting. If you weren't doing that and you wanted just to update the analysis view, you would just use the update button here. But I will show you here using the Enable Update on Posting button. It says when you enable this, it will update the analysis view, and in effect what it will do is it will count through all the records and populate the number of records selected here in this box. So I say yes here, and it is now telling us that the last entry that it has now recorded for the analysis view. You can also, if you have a budget set up with those same dimensional settings, the area and the product code, you can tick the box for including the budget entries as well. You also have a start date here, and that would be if you are using a set of codes that you have done previously, but perhaps your database is quite old now, and if you don't want to record this little subtable based on going back perhaps 10 years or whatever the age of your database is, you can say that you want to start recording from a given date. Once we have this set up, then we just simply say OK. Now in our database here, of course, that product dimension code, we don't actually have any postings going through to that. So in order to show you one that and how it works properly, I'm actually going to have a look at this particular one here, the customer analysis view, and that is based on the dimensions area and customer group. So I can simply come to the edit analysis view here, and again I get presented with a screen very similar to the balance by dimension from our chart of accounts, and I'm going to select how I want to view this. So I'm going to keep my lines as the GL account first of all, and then I'm going to show it by, and it will display for me the dimension codes that were set on that analysis view, being the area and the customer group. I will also set, which it is here, that it's for the month, and my date range. I've cheated a bit because I have run this before. It's brought through the GL account filter as per the analysis view itself. Again, I can choose to filter on the customer group, as I'm not showing it on the lines, but I'm just going to show you it in this manner first of all. Again, I have the ability to show the column names or just the headings. In this case, because I'm using the area code, it's much more meaningful to actually show the dimension name rather than its code. So again, I'm going to show matrix, and that is very sad that we don't have any data, and that is possibly because I haven't got got my correct dates showing. There's always a reason for them. If, ooh, I need to change that. Okay, let's try that again. That's better. It's always in the date. If ever you have a problem like that, it is your dates that are at fault. So I can now look at the breakdown against the various sales accounts through the area codes. But of course, if I've got 2 dimensions, then I probably do want to see it in that view. So I'm just going to escape and come back and now change this to our customer group code. And just check that everything is okay. And again, that has changed. Show matrix. And so now, through our various dimension codes, in the case of the company group code, it's large, medium, private and small, and then against the various area codes. Once I have done this, I might want to have a look and see what has actually made up any of the various values within my matrix. So I'm going to have a look at Europe North EU, Europe North EU, and against the small. So I've got an entry there of 2954. So coming to here, I'm seeing what the entry is, and to see the individual items, I just navigate again, or drill down again, sorry, and that isn't the one that I wanted. Let's see if we get it here. Okay, now in this case it is just showing me that it isn't an invoice or anything, it is actually a GL entry, so it's a GL journal that has generated that particular entry. If it was an invoice, then I would be able to just navigate and see that particular entry. I'll just have a look and see if we can find one. Okay, and I'll come down to here. Oh, there we are. There we have our invoice, so I can now navigate. My first entry is the sales invoice, so if I just go to show related entry, then it tells me and takes me to the actual posting for that particular entry. So now, last but not least, I can export my analysis by dimension out to Excel. I can share it with other people, or perhaps do various calculations, whatever it is that I want to do. And I do that simply by clicking on the Export to Excel button. And in this situation, it will actually create a spreadsheet for me. I just collected. Oh, I lost my cursor for a moment. There we go. So we can see we have our chart here and our pivot table fields to the right. We have on the info tab the details of the selections we made, i.e. the filtering, dates, etc. And then in the data we have all the information, as you would expect for a pivot table, that is made up that pivot table. Okay, so I will just close that down now, because we have come to the end of our session for this morning. So just in summary, we have gone through creating a new dimension and adding the values, so our wheel dimension, and we've seen how we add that dimension to the shortcut dimensions on the general ledger setup so that we can utilize that within our analysis views. We've looked at how we control what dimensions are posted through to our GL accounts to make sure that we can get the correct analysis. And we've also looked at how we can add or attach those dimensions values to our static records, such as our items and customers and vendors. We've looked from a global dimension perspective how we can analyse our chart of accounts, and then to incorporate our additional those shortcut dimensions, we've then looked at the analysis views, and we've created our analysis view. We have viewed the analysis matrix, and last but not least, we have exported to Excel and generated our pivot table. Well, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have enjoyed this session on dimensions. You can find a recording of this particular webinar and all of our previous webinars on metaphorix.co.uk/category/videos. Please feel free to download them as you wish. Alternatively, you can contact us. Debbie will be happy to answer any questions you have at debbiec@metaphorix.co.uk, or indeed you can email support on the normal support email address, and we will be happy to get back to you. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you on our next webinar.